We are talking to the Minister for Energy now. They are, of course, announcing these new plans for new gas power stations before 2025 in a bid to avoid blackouts in their attempt to reach net zero. So let's speak now to Graham Stuart MP. Good morning to you. Tell us a little bit about these plans. A few people are a bit confused as to why, after 14 years, you're suddenly deciding to do this now.
Oh, well, the government's made transformational changes over the last 14 years. Less than 7% of our electricity came from renewables in 2010. That was Labour's dire legacy, whereas today it's approaching 50% and we're building out faster and faster. But, as we know, renewables are intermittent, so you've got to make sure you have the backup, and we make no apology for ensuring we have that in place, which is why we've said that as well as extending the life of existing gas plants, we may need some new gas plants as we grow out our renewables even further. But this, it might sound as if it might be in conflict with net zero, but it's not. It actually complements our move to increase the amount of renewables in our system and carry on leading the world. You may have seen overnight that we've cut our emissions by more than any other major economy on Earth. We've cut it by more than 50%, and that's happened under this Conservative government as we've removed coal, increased renewables, cleaned our system, but we're determined to keep the lights on as well, and that's why the Prime Minister can always be relied on to take the long-term decisions in the interest of the nation. OK, what about the cost though, Graham? Is it going to cost us more or less or just the same? Well, overall, renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels, both here and in other countries around the world, as we roll it out. So what this new gas capacity will do is ensure that in the limited time when we need it, we have the backup. So a gas plant is relatively cheap to build capital-wise, but of course the big driver of cost is the cost of the fuel. And that's why we're increasing renewables. So although we may need new gas, it will actually be running less and less of the time, and we're also bringing on other technologies such as battery storage, pumped hydro, interconnectors with our neighbours, and other flexes in the system in order to minimise the time that those fossil fuel plants have to run. But we have them there as an insurance policy, and I reckon that your viewers and listeners will regard that as the right thing to do, to put the long-term interest of the country first.
Although you'll be aware that a parliamentary report last year found that we are way off track hitting our 2035 clean energy target, and a lot of people will be saying, well, is gas, as you've been saying, not necessarily the obvious solution when you're talking about trying to go to clean sources by 2035. Is this really the answer? Labour saying it's a sign of Tory failure and an effective ban on onshore wind.
Well, we're obviously not going to take any lessons from Labour. The decarbonisation of our energy system flatlined under Labour. It's been transformed under the Conservatives. If you are a Green, if you care about the environment, you cannot vote Labour, because Labour do not deliver. The Conservatives do, and we are on track to deliver our 2035 targets. They are world leading. We're the first major economy to put net zero into law. We're not only delivering it, we're doing so with record levels of employment, with the economy having grown by more than 80% since 1990. We are getting the sweet spot of the UK leading the world, doing the right thing against the climate threat, but doing so in a way which strengthens our economic competitiveness and allows us to maintain our position as a world leader in tackling the environment and setting an example to others.
There's a man tackling your environment there, which I'm glad that's worked out well. Let's talk about your sweet spot, Graham. Look at today. I'm looking at you here. You're drenched. I can hear the rain hitting your umbrella there. It is a bad day. Would that affect our renewable capacity? A day like today, or a week, if this was to turn into a week, would there be considerable effect on our renewable capacity?
Well, renewables, as you rightly identify, are very much dependent on the weather, whether the sun shines, whether the wind blows. That's why we're ensuring that we have the backup that we require. That's not just these gas-fired power stations, which will, as I say, operate less and less, but we want to send a clear signal to the market that we need these as a backup. They are part of our net zero plan. They will help us deliver net zero and a decarbonised energy system by 2035. But we've got to have the backup. We might get long periods, as you suggest, when the wind doesn't blow. But we can be proud of the fact that more and more energy comes from wind, and we've got the first, second, third, fourth, and even the fifth largest offshore wind farms in the entire world. That's all happened under this Conservative government. If you care about the environment and you want to see cheap energy for the future of the nation, then you need to support the Conservatives, because Labour would put it all at risk.
OK, we've done your sweet spot. Let's talk about your weak spot. What are you going to do about the MPs who might well be following Lee Anderson? And is really Boris Johnson the solution to this, Rishi Sunak's arch enemy?
Well, Lee Anderson, it's a shame he's gone. I mean, obviously he's been on a bit of a journey already, from Labour to the Conservatives. Now he's with Reform. He recognised that he'd said the wrong thing, but he couldn't quite bring himself to say sorry. So that's a particular story of him. But the Conservative Party is absolutely determined to back the Prime Minister and make sure we don't have Keir Starmer, because that's the choice facing the British people. We either have Keir Starmer, who has no plans, no idea. I've seen no evidence of it. I'm used to. You can see Lee Anderson on the stage with his new leader, barely able to hide his irritation. So I'm not sure how long that particular honeymoon is going to last either.
And Boris Johnson going to be back on the campaign trail?
I don't know whether Boris is going to be back on the campaign trail, but obviously he supports the Conservative Party. He has always dedicated himself to this country, and he recognises that only a government led by Rishi Sunak rather than one led by Keir Starmer will protect the huge rise in education standards we've seen since we came in 2010, will protect the 4 million extra jobs that have been created since 2010, and will ensure that we continue the energy transition, meeting our net zero targets, but also vitally strengthening our economy while it's at it.
Graham Stewart, thank you very much indeed for facing up to the conditions today.
Lovely spring.